Here's a behind the scenes for these two photos taken during a icy, foggy day in January 2014. This was a series of photos I took last week near my home. It's a place called Lighthouse Park. This was about 9 o'clock in the morning. I had just run an errand and I was driving back past the park, and the fog was rolling in. This is a lighthouse on a point surrounded by old growth trees. The fog was rolling in off the ocean, and the sun was just coming through, and there was some very interesting light patterns and so on. Looked like a good opportunity to get some shots. So I thought, let's take half an hour, quick detour, let's get a couple of shots. I didn't even have my camera. I was just all I had was my camera phone. And like they say, the best camera is the one you have on you. I decided to stop and just did a quick walk down to the lighthouse and then back again, and just took a few shots as I went. And most of them are lousy. What can I say? I've got a couple of dozen shots here. Most of them are not very interesting at all. There's really no subject, and it was kind of experimental, and that's okay. I didn't know what I was going to get. This was completely impromptu, last minute decision to just pull in and take a boo. And but there's a couple of shots here that are worth looking at. So let's look at this first one here. Well, actually, let's. I'm walking down the path, and initial couple of shots were not too interesting. This isn't compelling enough to be an interesting subject matter. Not too much going on with lighting, kind of blah. I walk a little bit more, and I'm starting to see some interesting light effects with the fog and the sunshine. So that's interesting, but there's no subject here. This is just trees with some cool light. But all I needed to do was crouch down, because just the very same trees, the very same sun, but just crouching down, there was this old wooden fence right there. And just by moving my body around and reframing and really consciously creating a composition with something in the foreground and something in the midground and then something in the far background, the sun in this case, creating that sense of depth. This has a lot more depth, a lot more interest than this one, which is just the exact same place. So overall, I don't mind this composition at all. I've got, I'm not too crazy about this tree growing out of the top of the post. I guess I could have moved left or right a little. But I wanted to see most of the sun and the rays coming out, and I wanted to see that light coming through this cobweb. I thought that was kind of interesting as well. So overall, I'm pleased with the composition. A couple of things that are a problem, though. It just happened to be the angle of the light hitting the camera phone and then reflecting back and hitting this post. This is actually the lens itself, the lens of the camera phone, and then this is sort of the edge of the lens cover. And it just happened to bounce off the camera phone and hit the post, and there's a bit of smudge of white there as well. Those are all distracting elements, and with Lightroom you can very easily get rid of those using the clone or the heel brush. You literally can touch an area. It's going to sample an area nearby that it thinks would be a good match and replace it with something, with a color that's hopefully close and without the noise. So I am just going to trace that area there, and it's going to scooch up a little and try to find a color that doesn't have that line. I'll just move off, and you can see that's a lot better than what was there before. If we take a look, so here's the before and here's the after picture. You can see it's just a lot less distracting to have those reflection spots removed. So overall, this is a pleasing shot. It's kind of an interesting shot. You can look at the textures for a while. There's sort of a story going on here, and that's what makes a photo interesting. If we take a look at all the rest of the photos, again, most of them not so interesting. This one was kind of cool. There was a spider web that was completely covered in water droplets that had more or less frozen onto the filaments of the webbing, and you can see it sort of sagging under its own weight. It's quite an interesting shot. It almost looks like string. But it also, this stuff looks better with your eye than it does necessarily with a photo. Lots of testing there. I tried to get some of this. None of it really worked out. Wasn't really getting a good subject matter. Then I walked to, this is the end of the road basically. There's a gate, you can't really go any further. There's the lighthouse keeper's house right down here. And then this is the rock jutting out into the ocean, and you can't see it, but there's a lighthouse right here. And I was trying to get it framed basically, have a bit of trees on this side and have the lighthouse kind of emerging out of the fog. Well, the problem with with all cameras really is with automatic mode, they try to come up with an average exposure. Basically, they're trying to expose or let in enough light so things are showing detail without overexposing, and it sort of takes an average of everything that's in your frame. So it wanted to show some detail of this really dark stuff over here, but by doing that, it completely overexposes the sky. But even with camera phone, it's you basically just touch the screen over here or over here, something a little bit lighter, and it will use that as kind of the midpoint to adjust for, and it will let this other stuff get dark, which is what I did here. And by doing that, you start seeing some of the lighthouse sort of emerging out of the fog. And again, the fog is rolling in and out here. It was still pretty thick, so you can sort of barely see the lighthouse, which is kind of the look I was hoping to get. It has that moody look to it. This has all gone quite dark, probably too dark. This kind of sucks your eyeballs out. And so I kept taking. There's another shot that's I think is a nice exposure. You could still see some detail over here. This isn't too overexposed. You can see the lighthouse. The fog was clearing a little bit by now. This is only like 30 seconds or less than that even apart. So things were changing very quickly. But I liked this result. This one looks good to me. I can actually see a hint of the sun off the glass of the lighthouse. So that helps create a bit of pop and makes this look a little more 3D. Then you start thinking, okay, this is a good overall frame, but there's too much going on over here that I don't need. Too much road, definitely too much of this. This is really ugly, and it doesn't do anything to tell the story. It kind of pulls your eye away. So just by moving your feet and zooming in, or zooming your lens if you have that. This was again just a camera phone, or in post, as they call it, just doing a crop, and I believe that's what I did here. If we take a look at the image, it's really the same image that I had before, but I just did a crop. So just get rid of all this extra road, get rid of this pipe and some of the stuff that's really not helpful for the story. This is a lot more interesting suddenly. You get rid of the distractions, you get rid of the things that pull your eye away. Well, not quite. There's a few good things and there's a couple of bad things. A couple of good things are these little planks of wood here with this fence. These are what they call leading lines. They kind of help with that sense of perspective, and it helps lead your eye in a certain direction. And in this case, it really helps lead your eye towards what the star of this picture it's supposed to be, and that's the lighthouse. So I like these three leading lines. But the problem area is this other object here. I don't know what that is. It's like a sewer vent or something, but it's light colored, and so it really draws your eye, and it's such a distinctive shape, and it's got a bit of color to it. You just can't help but look at it. On your way to this, you kind of get distracted by this ugly bit, and you keep getting pulled back. So this is a piece of ugly that I'd like to get rid of, a little bit of distraction. And that's not nearly as bad, but even this little piece, this is just a dead leaf. This is completely natural. There's a few more down here, but this one really kind of pulls your eye away from the lighthouse. So by the time you finally land on the lighthouse and you want to look at it, you get kind of pulled over to here. So that's a distraction. This is a distraction. And the other little bit that I'd like to do, if I could, is to make this lighthouse come out of the fog a little bit more. And I didn't have another shot that worked. Basically, the fog was coming back in again. This was sort of the best one. But with a little bit of painting in this area, I just painted this area and said, just for that area, reduce the exposure, just darken it up a bit. And in fact, I also boosted the sharpness in there a little bit. And the result is this thing. So a couple of things. You can see the before. So there's this object, and this sort of dimness. And then just by a little bit, this is called content-aware fill. I used Photoshop for that. It takes 2 seconds. You just trace around the object that you want to get rid of, push a button, and Photoshop is smart enough to say, okay, what is behind that object? And I'm going to fill that in. So it recognizes there's a bush and it fills it in. It's actually quite amazing what it can do. Same thing up here. And then this area, again, I just did a little brushing using a slightly lower exposure and a little bit of sharpness. So that's the end result. And I think that's quite pleasing. You've got leading lines, you've got this real sense of depth, you've got the foreground, the very foreground trees quite dark, and the midground is a little bit lighter, and then the background trees, you can see they're sort of receding into the fog, getting lighter and lighter. That creates that sense of depth and texture in there. We've got these leading lines, and the road and the grass, everything sort of pulls your eye to this, which is the star of the shot. And it's this lighthouse coming out of the fog with some moody looking dead trees in front of it. I like the blue sky up here. I like kind of the overall vignette. This thing isn't dead center on purpose. That would be too symmetrical. This has sort of a balance to it. And overall, it's a not too lousy of a shot.